What if I told you that your internet cable does nothing? That there are no submarine cables under the ocean and all internet communication is a lie? Well, let's investigate.
This is not my world, 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 this is not my world.
When I first heard about the internet cables under the ocean, I was like, this doesn't make sense, you know, but then I was trying to make some research on this, and one thing came to my mind in the morning, which was the max length of the UTP cable, which is this cable. It's called the UTP or Cat6 cable, and this is the cable that connects your computer into your internet box or your router, basically. And I was like, there must be a maximum length of this. And so I was looking for the answer, and I found it on this article, and people answered, and they said basically it's about 100 meter or 300 feet mark. And they also linked this Wikipedia entry, which I had a look at. And indeed, this is the Cat6 patch cable, which is the internet cable. And they say here that it is 100 meter maximum distance. So this cable has a maximum 100 meter distance. And you are telling me that there are thousands of miles of cable similar to this under the ocean? Give me a break. Not only that, I also mentioned in my previous videos that when we take a breather, we are probably actually connecting to the ether, which is the outer realm. And the Ethernet cable is probably actually connecting to the ether. Why else call it Ethernet cable, right? It just doesn't make sense. Why don't they call it internet cable? No, they call it Ethernet cable. And if you haven't watched my video, please watch it. I'm going to link it in the video description below. So this cable doesn't really make any sense. It is not connecting you to the internet, it connects you to the ether. Here's the second meaning of ether, a medium that was once supposed to fill all space and to support the propagation of electromagnetic waves, an intervening substance through which signals can travel as means for communication. Intervening substance? What are they talking about? Here's another meaning, the fifth and highest element after air and earth and fire and water, was believed to be the substance composing all heavenly bodies. You see what I mean? There's no reason to call the Ethernet cable an Ethernet cable if it is not connecting to the ether, right? Do you think when we have a Skype call and we see each other on video, webcam, that thousands of miles of cable, submarine cable, is making it possible, you know, to have this almost instant communication? Give me a break. Here's another article I found from Mental Floss. Now this is the 2014 submarine cable map, and they are telling us that we have all these cables under the ocean, right? Thousands of miles of cable, and we have instant communication between United States and Europe. They say that the cable installation is slow, tedious, expensive work. So why do it? Look at this. It's so ridiculous. These are actors, right? And they are showing us that this is the cable that we are communicating through the ocean. And you need manual labor to make this happen, right? I mean, this is just unbelievable. 99% of international data is transmitted by wires at the bottom of the ocean called submarine communication cables. Point second, sharks are trying to eat the internet. I mean, give me a break. Let's have a look at this. So they are showing us that there is this cable under the ocean, and there's the shark coming, and he just wants to bite it through because, you know, it looks like fish or something. I mean, honestly, why would a shark go to the internet cable and want to dismantle it? You know, like, what the fucking sense in this? You know, this is a fucking actor. This shark is an actor. Nothing else. It's just an actor. Third, the internet is as vulnerable underwater as it is underground. Really. Connecting the world through undersea cables isn't exactly new. And they have this map here. So this is an old cable showing submarine telegraph lines between America and Europe. So they are trying to tell us that when we make a phone call on a landline, it actually goes through these thousands of miles of cable to reach America. Give me a fucking break. 1856 they say. So they already laid the line here. Laid the line. Ley lines. What if these cables are actually ley lines? They laid the lines. So then I found this official submarine cable map, which they were referring to from that article, and I was able to zoom in a little bit more. and see how these ley lines are actually connecting the different continents. You know, these are probably ley lines, as I said, nothing else. And there are no cables, you know, like, just think about it. You are sending a signal from here, from London, to, let's say, New York. And within less than a second, you have this here, and it is thousands of miles. So do you think this is really possible? Now, let me tell you something else here. If this was even possible, it wouldn't be possible on a globe Earth, because the globe Earth is always rotating and always moving around the solar system. So this movement would twist all the cables. So this would only be possible on a flat Earth anyway. But I digress. Look at these ridiculous lines. I mean, why on earth would you put these into the canal? So the question is, why can't they actually put the lines under earth, right? They could just have here, let's say, in Cairo, one center, and from there they would be able to go through Iraq, Iran, and go to India. Why do you need to lay these lines under the ocean? It just doesn't make sense. And these lines don't even make sense because they don't go straight. They are wasting the lines. Look at that. They are wasting cable. They are not going straight. And they are connecting these ridiculous destinations through non-straight lines. Again, this line is not straight and yet is going through Japan and to China. I mean, ridiculous. And they here have this diagram to tell us how it is actually working. So they have the submarine cable here, then they have repeaters to connect the submarine cable to submarine cable, and then this is how the submarine cable actually looks like inside. Optical fibers, silicone gel, buffering material, copper sheath, and all the rest of it. Now let me show you something else here. There is Argentina and Falkland Islands, which is close to the so-called Antarctica. And as you can see, it seems like there is no internet cables to Falkland Islands or nothing, you know, to the end of Argentina. And yet on nightearth.com we can see these lights lighting up next to Falkland Islands. There is no island there. There is no internet cable to Falkland Islands, and yet some people are using the lights at night over the ocean, yeah? There's almost no lights in Argentina, but the ocean is full of it. So what is going on here? And then look at this. Does this really make sense, you know, having the cables like this? Why do they connect to here rather than here? That would be the closest. From Jakarta they could connect it right here, but they choose to connect it even further because that makes sense, right? And again, here's another cable making no sense, connecting two cities over the ocean in a non-linear line. Here's the Vocus Australia-Singapore cable laying the lines, you know, the ley lines through this ridiculous ship. And here's the map closer from Singapore going through this little channel, going through Christmas Island, going to Perth. Why not go to Port Hedland? It's much closer. Well, they chose to go to Perth, right? They are mocking us. None of it is real. 4,600 kilometer cable, right? But this UTP cable has the maximum length of 100 meters. So here's an interesting video I found from the motherboard inside the beach house connecting the world's internet.
Well, the cable terminating here from the US is 7,500 kilometers. We've had a fall between Sweden and Bornholm where our cable took a hit from an anchor. This one shows the damaged cable section. Cable has been twisted, and this is what happens when it's been hit by an anchor and dragged along the seabed. The armoring wires that should have been surrounding the inner core of the cable is amiss. The important thing, of course, is the fibers that transport all the data. We have a cable caught on the cable from here to the US. I mean, there's no data. There's no connectivity. You cannot go and think that a lot of people depend on what you're doing. But really, more than 90% is caused by fishing gear and anchors in shallower waters.
And the remaining 10% are sharks, of course.
Oh yes, all those sharks, all the time.
The rear marker and the front marker. If you look at them from the ocean side and they're aligned, then you know that you are actually right on top of the cable. So if you're about to anchor, or if you're a fishing vessel about to deploy your fishing gear, you might wait until you're clear of the cable.
Would you say most ships observe this and obey these markers, or do they ignore them?
It is our hope that they watch them and obey them.
I think there's a lot of things, a lot of infrastructure that is a potential target. And maybe that's also the reason why there's no big signs on the building. So this is the cable coming in from the outside, from a beach manhole, entering the building. We have the fiber cable and the power cable. As simple as that. 7,500 kilometers, and now it's here. I find it hard to believe intelligence agencies would try to tap information here. As I see it, that wouldn't make any sense.
So he's saying 7,500 kilometers is between US and EU. And it takes for the data to travel through this 7,500 kilometers 80 milliseconds. Then you can see that this is the same UTP cable that I showed you here. And yet this has a maximum length of 100 meters. Otherwise it picks up interference. The fiber transporting data, you know, this is fiber, this is made of fiber. Since when this is conductive and transporting data? You know what I mean? And what is Sea Earth? This button for the Sea Earth and the knob for Sea Earth. He's also saying that the 90% of the cable issues happen because of fishing, right? And anchors, like what on earth? And oh yeah, all those sharks, he's laughing at it because he knows this is just bullshit and he's an actor, obviously. And they have this whole warehouse set up just for that one fucking cable, right? You could just go there and snap it. And then he's saying, yeah, that's why we don't have all those signs on the house. But he lets them film it and then puts it up on the internet. I mean, honestly, it doesn't make sense. There was also a laser danger sign on these, one of the boxes. They have these signs so that the ships will see and they wouldn't put their anchors on the bottom of the ocean. And yet, you know, why do you make it so ridiculously non-obvious? You know, like how would ships just see that kind of drawn picture? Why wouldn't you make a lighthouse? You know, some lights definitely can be seen even in the dark. And then he says, yeah, we hope that they obey these signs. So, you know, we have all these cables, important communication for government agencies, and yet they just hope that the ships will follow the signs? I mean, give me a break. Here's another video from IDG TV.
This is what carries your email, videos, and games all around the world. It's an undersea internet cable. It's being made right here in Kitakyushu, Japan, at NEC's OCC factory. The cables come in different varieties, including heavily armored ones, but they all start with bundles of optical fibers. The fibers are wrapped in layers for strength, starting with a steel tube, then steel wires and a copper tube, and finally a polyethylene sheath for water resistance. Enormous spinner machines and spools are needed to create the cables. When they're armored, the cables are wrapped in more steel wires and then asphalt and plastic strings. That makes them pretty tough.
Even though the single armor is just one layer, this is kind of difficult to bend.
Once manufacturing is complete, the cables are spooled into large tanks and then tested for water resistance and other parameters. Dozens of workers are needed to load the cable as well as the large repeater units onto the ship. Once inside, the cable is fed into 3 tanks below the main deck, and they're huge, hot, and humid. The cable has to be looped very carefully to prevent tangles. Next up is the Hector 6, an ROV that can work up to 2,000 meters below the surface of the ocean. It has caterpillar tracks for propulsion, jets to help bury the cable in its trench, as well as robotic arms to manipulate it. It takes a light touch and a lot of patience to install a cable all the way across the Pacific. 9,000 kilometer long cable, and they need manual spooling for this, really. Manual spooling for 9,000 kilometers. And that cable laying vehicle, does that really look like waterproof to you? Honestly. Oh, and the high-tech control room running Windows XP in 2015? Give me a fucking break. Here's another ridiculous video by CBS This Morning. And of course, obviously all of these are actors.
When you pick up the phone to reach out and touch someone across the oceans, it's only possible because of ships like the Global Sentinel.
This is cable tank number 1.
And what am I standing on right now?
You're standing on fiber optic cable that's going to be laid from here towards Brazil.
This is how worldwide communication begins. Jeff Sanders is a captain at TE Connectivity Subcom, which calls itself the world's largest provider of under-ocean fiber optic cable.
They're coiling it the same way they did in the 1800s.
He gave us a rare view of more than 900 miles of cable spooled tightly by hand in one of 3 side-by-side tanks aboard the ship anchored in the port of Newington in New Hampshire.
So the cable we're walking on right now will be under the ocean carrying my phone calls?
Yes, it will. It's a good chance any call you make to South America in the future could be on this exact cable for the next 20, 25 years. Cable comes right off into the ocean from here.
Robots take over from there, diving to a depth too deep for humans. The machines use water jets to create a trench, allowing the cable to sink into the seabed and become buried.
95% of all telephone and data is transferred over submarine cables.
Not satellite?
Not satellite.
It's what allows us to rely on instant everything: phone calls, banking, web surfing, email, streaming video, and other communication.
Heavy case.
And it all began 150 years ago.
We have here samples of the early cables from the 1850s.
This is what the first permanent cable looked like under the Atlantic.
Absolutely.
Barney Finn at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History helped string together an exhibit commemorating the 150th anniversary of the first permanent transatlantic cable. Some of the items have not been on display in more than a century.
And this indeed is the cable going across the Atlantic.
Late in rough seas, the first few copper cables broke or burnt out.
We can transmit the entire contents of the Library of Congress across the Atlantic Ocean in 2 seconds.
At the TE Subcom plant in New Hampshire, the company uses colored glass strands of fiber to create the cables for those over-the-top providers, like Google, Facebook, and Microsoft, explains Vice President John Dufour.
Look at how thin these fibers are. This is like a hair.
These are the size of a strand of human hair, but about 1,000 times stronger.
And demand is just as strong. The cable highway runs to the Global Sentinel ship 24 hours a day until fully loaded. Once installed in the dark depths of the ocean, it'll be a highway of fiber optic light.
It's amazing. And Mark sent us these thin little threads.
Yeah, it's housed in this. When they put it under, it's housed in a thicker thing, but the actual cable itself, I mean, you can barely see it.
So they are telling us that 900 miles of cable are on these 3 spools. Now, there's a problem with that. Because first of all, how do you do 3 spools? The cable they show is very rigid. So once you get to the end of the drum, to the spool at the top, then how do you move to the next spool? Either you start from the top and then you have to, avoid gravity, have these actors in a matrix spooling it manually, or you have to go to the other spool, go down to the bottom, and there start again spooling. The cable looks very rigid, so I'm not sure how would they do this U-turn. So that doesn't make sense. 900 miles is 1,448 kilometers. Now 1,448 kilometers is 1,448,000 meters. And I just made a guess. One row of cable or one spiral of cable in one line, one layer, would be about, let's say, 900 meters, but I think probably even less. So dividing 1,448,000 by 900, we get to 1,609 rows or layers of this spiral. And I was calculating with 2 centimeter thickness of this cable, which would lead us to 1,609 times 2 centimeter is 3,218 centimeter, which is 32.18 meter. And that would be the height of this spool. And I found some data on the Global Sentinel. They say the depth is 11.3 meters. So there's no way that a 30-meter high spool would fit in, right? But obviously if they say 3 spools would fit in and you can make this U-turn, then just exactly it would fit in there. But how about the 9,000 kilometer cable? This is 900 miles only. 9,000 kilometer long cable for Google is about 5,592 miles. And we were talking about 900 miles only in 3 spools on that ship. Now when they show this cable from 1866, this doesn't look like internet cable to me or telegraph cable to me. I think it is ancient tech. and they are trying to just mimic it. None of it makes sense. They don't have cables under the ocean. They are just showing that they heard about this ancient tech. They have no fucking idea how it works and what it does, but perhaps it would be good for the internet. So they are like, yeah, we are using this ancient tech for the internet. Ridiculous. They are also telling us that they were back then laying the cables with these wooden ships, right? And where's all the cable? I don't see it. And this is another ridiculous one. They are showing this yarn, you know, this fiber, and this is supposed to transfer your internet, your data. Give me a break. And then they show these thin little threads, and this transfers your data. Do you actually buy this? They need manual laborers for this? To spool it manually? Give me a break. You know, all of these people are actors. And for some reason I was curious what other videos are recommended to me. So I went down further and I found this one. Do you see this guy looking very similar to that other guy? So I guess the AI of YouTube just picked up on the face because they use face recognition obviously, and he picked up that it is the same guy. You know, it's the same actor, acting once as the captain of the Global Sentinel, and here he is a cowboy, the same guy. You know, like, look at the similarities. I mean, unbelievable. This prison asylum is an actor-based reality. They don't have enough actors, so they are fulfilling several roles, just as in movies. We can see Tom Cruise in several different films. It's the same here in politics, on the media, on the news channels, on YouTube. These people fill several roles. They are actors. Here's another interesting video from Vox. They are telling us that they have laid already in the 1800s these telegraph cables through these wooden ships, and this is the pool. If you remember, the guy said between the Atlantic and Europe they needed 5,700 kilometers, and you are telling me that this pool contains 5,700 kilometers of cable? Give me a break. Here's another ridiculous cable laying. Look at this pool. Does it look like thousands of kilometers of cable? I mean, all of this is a theater. Do you understand? These are actors. Just so that you think that there is this high technology. No, they don't have high technology. It's all a lie. We are connecting through the ether. That's why we have Ethernet cables. All communication is a lie. And that's it for me for today. This is a completely community funded channel. YouTube never paid me a penny. So if you'd like to support my work, please go to my support page and kick in a couple of bucks so that I can keep up the lights. Thanks everyone who supported my work so far. Are you starting to understand my ether communication? See you in the next one.
I'm just longing night by night for the other side to be alright, 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 alright.